Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Cullinane is next, and 10 minutes to the minute to give people a chance to get back in before we adjourn shortly.
Exactly.
And you will have a chance in the afternoon to get back.
Thank you.
So.
Yep. Can I first of all say, like that, and I don't say this in any trite or cliched way, that we as members of this committee prepare for these meetings. There's an awful lot of work goes into us preparing, as people can see, with the documentation that we have, and I would expect witnesses to prepare for the meeting as well. So I will reserve judgment on whether or not Mr Dunn should come back before us again. I hope he stays for the afternoon. Maybe we should have some discussion ourselves as members as to whether or not he should return, but I would say I will reserve judgment, and we will wait and see what happens in the afternoon. But can I first of all just ask both Mr Dunn and Mr Cullinane, do you understand the role and the function of the Public Accounts Committee, first of all, Mr Dunn?
I believe I do.
And what is your understanding of our role and our function?
It's to review the votes, basically, of all of the various departments under.
Well, it's more than that. Mr Cullinane, do you understand the role and the function of the Public Accounts Committee?
Deputy, yes. I believe I do, yes.
Okay. Do you understand the role and the function, Mr Dunn, of the Controller and Auditor General's Office?
It's the equivalent. My understanding is that it is the equivalent of the external auditor.
Exactly. Mr Cullinane, do you understand the role and the function of the Controller and Auditor General's Office?
Yes, I do.
You do. So there are internal dynamics within Garda Síochána that would have dealt with the issues in the Garda Training College. So we know, obviously, it would have been from the Commissioner down to Assistant Commissioners, Assistant Commissioner for Change Management, the Finance Directorate, the Head of Human Resources, the CAO's Office, Internal Audit, GIAS and the Audit Committee all would have had a role. And it would have been a very specific role, obviously, for internal audit, quite different to all the others. Externally, then, you would have the Public Accounts Committee, the Controller and Auditor General's Office, the Attorney General's Office, Revenue, and lots of other external organisations as well. And yet none of those external organisations were informed of any of these issues until 2016, I think it is. First of all, Mr Dunn, there was an account given by the Commissioner when she was before us that she first became aware of these issues in 2000, I think it was July 2016, or sorry, 15. Subsequently, Mr Rowan said it was June 2015, but that could have been a mistake. Whenever it was, she became aware mid-2015. And my understanding is, following that, a steering group was established, and you played a central role in that steering group. Isn't that correct? Yes. How is it that the Commissioner was informed of the extent of the problems? A steering group was established. A process was put in place to examine these issues, a very high-level steering group, and yet the Controller and Auditor General's Office was not at any point notified. Can you, first of all, Mr Dunn, explain that to me?
Can explain what that working group was doing?
No, you don't know, because I know what the working group is doing, and I want you to be very direct, because, as the Chair said, we have very limited time. I'm concerned about process and procedures.
Right.
I've dealt with the internal elements of this and dynamics. We have the external. The external bodies were not given the information. One of the central charges made by Mr Barrett and Mr Kelly in his internal audit report is that information was kept from internal audit and kept for the purview of the CNAG, the PAC and potentially others. So what I'm saying is the Commissioner was made aware in mid-2015, there is a high-level steering group, there is discussions going on, and yet the CNAG's office was not informed of that process. Why was that the case? I'm asking you that, Mr Dunn. If you can answer that question, not context, what the committee was doing, why the Controller and Auditor General's Office was not informed.
I can't answer, for something that didn't happen. It was clear that the various bodies would need to be informed. I've heard from the Controller and Auditor General earlier on this morning, right, and I accept that it should have been informed earlier. We just didn't. So
nobody in the room. We have a steering committee of very senior individuals dealing with all these issues, and nobody in the room thought that we should inform the Controller and Auditor General's Office of even the establishment of a steering group.
At that point in time,
so
that's
then,
correct.
in the note then that we have, is on the screen here, where it says the CAO, it's on page 2 of that note, you see it at the top, the CAO noted that the work has progressed on this matter for a number of years, and the CEO pointed out, which is you, Mr. Dunn, that the group will consider whether external involvement is warranted, but it is not required at this position now, or point in time now. Yeah. So when you were talking about external involvement, what were you referring to?
I was thinking of basically anything outside. So,
yes.
So what
would that include the CNAG?
It would. What would have been in my view, what the bodies that would have needed to be notified at a point in time were the department. I would include our internal audit even as an external body in that context because it's independent. Certainly the CNAG, yeah.
But what it says is, and I'm reading what's in front of me, black and white, that there was a consideration about whether there should be external involvement, whether it was warranted, but you say that it was not required at this point in time. Is that an accurate reflection of what you said?
It is, absolutely.
So, Mr. McCarthy, would you see that as acceptable, that the Commissioner would have been made aware in the middle of 2015, whatever the date that was, that there was a high-level steering group established? And I put this to you in the previous meeting, and what you said, from recollection, is that once a process was put in place to deal with these issues, your office should have been informed.
That would be my view as to the correct action.
Would you have expected the steering group, when they were considering these matters, to have given not just consideration to, but would have acted upon a decision to inform your office at that point?
I think it's very difficult to put myself in the minds of the individuals who were involved in the steering committee.
But in process terms, Mr. McCarthy, only in process terms.
Yeah, but in process terms, I'm quite clear that my office should have been informed in mid-2015 about this.
And I asked you earlier, Mr. Dunn, were you aware of the function of the Controller and Auditor General? Because one of the central charges which has been made here by some people within the organisation is that all of this was kept in-house. You might be aware that Mr. Kelly talked about a circling of the wagons, keep this internal. Mr. Barrett made very similar accusations as well. So here was a situation in 2015. Bear in mind, we've gone from 2006 to 2015. A steering group was set up with the support of the Commissioner, and yet a decision was made not to inform the CNAG's office.
At that point in time.
At that point. And I find that incredible. And just to go back then to the July meeting in 2015, you were to brief the Audit Committee. And that did not happen. And this goes back to my critique of you not reading the report. You said, and you've gone through this with Dr. MacDonald, you felt that you had to gather more information, which is the reason why you did not bring this to the attention of the July meetings. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. You did not have the right at that point in time, in my view, to make that call, because it was actually stated, and it says here, that the report was compiled so that the CEO would brief the Audit Committee in June. This did not happen. It then goes on to say, in interim audit report on page 15, it states that in progressing the issues, this is internal audit, we conclude that GIAS should have been informed immediately and that the report should have been on the agenda of the Audit Committee meeting in July 2015. GIAS, with the backing of the Audit Committee, were better placed to do the investigative work and the information gathering. So what I'm taking from that is very similar to what internal audit took from it, that you essentially assumed the role of internal audit for that time period.
The role of internal audit is actually looking at and identifying what has gone on and making recommendations. The steering committee at that time was doing two things. It was actually trying to find out what the scope of the issue was, and secondly, it was trying to implement, as I would describe them, the no-regret decisions that needed to be implemented. It was always my view that internal audit.
But sorry, Mr. Dunn, I accept all that. What I'm saying is that there is a critique, a very strong critique in the internal audit report, which says that they were the body that was best placed to do that investigative work, which goes back to what I was saying earlier. There was a sense that we'll deal with this in-house. We won't allow internal audit to deal with it, or the audit committee, or the CNAG. We'll deal with it. They are saying that. So what I'm saying, if internal audit is saying that in a report, does that not concern you?
I don't accept it.
You don't accept internal audit's report finding in that regard?
I think that that's a point of view, and let me just explain my mindset at the time, because I think you're challenging the mindset that I had. Okay, the fact is that the approaches by internal audit prior to 2015, for whatever reason, had not been successful. We've heard that they did not get access to information. We've heard a series of reasons why they weren't able to progress it to the point that they would like to progress it. I was in a position where I could actually make sure that internal audit eventually would be able to get traction in this matter. I needed to get the information that was available within the organisation from, for example, the Commissioner's Office, from the Office of the Deputy Commissioners, from the College. That was the mindset that I had at that point in time, was to put internal audit in a position where they could conduct an audit.
I've heard that. I'll come back to that with you later, because I think there is
actually then what happened.
There is an irreconcilable difference between what internal audit is saying and what you're saying. I'll come back to that later. But just one final question for Mr. McCabe, because Miss MacDonald put this to you earlier. It does, in the same note here, it does, as was put to you, there's an account of your contribution where you say that this could have been career-ending for you because of the irregularities. The Commissioner, when she was here, has accepted that there was financial irregularities. The Commissioner, when she was here, said that the findings of the interim audit report are absolutely and totally unacceptable. So given that, does that not raise very serious issues for people who held managerial positions in Garda Síochána for the time period that these irregularities were happening? And do you believe that there is then culpability on your part and the part of others who had responsibility in relation to those irregularities? Was that in the foremost of your mind when you said that this could have been career-ending for you?
What I was referring to there was those funds that would have been gone missing or something to that effect. We were left with a situation we had to manage. It was in place. We were managing it as best we could. We were trying to bring it and surface it and change it. And it has changed to a degree. But in terms of my concerns and the career-ending piece of it, if there was any criminal activity.
But if the Commissioner is accepting there's financial irregularities, Mr. McCabe, the Commissioner accepts this now. Internal audit are saying there's financial irregularities, and you were in a very senior management position at the time in the Garda Training College. Surely you must take some responsibility for the fact that these irregularities existed under your watch. Would you at least today accept that?
In terms of irregularities, the whole thing it's a bizarre setup. I have to accept that completely.
The Commissioner says financial irregularities, Mr. McCabe. We will have the Commissioner here next week. I will put those questions to her. I will put to her the responses of Ms McMahon, Mr. McCabe, Ms Nugent, Mr Dunn, Mr Nugent, Mr O'Cullough, Mr McGee. I'm asking you now that you were in a very senior position. The Commissioner is accepting there was financial irregularities. Those financial irregularities happened on your watch. People in this room have to take responsibility for that. You're one of those. Will you at least today take responsibilities that if there was financial irregularities, they happened on your watch?
I certainly take responsibility for any actions I took. But in terms of any criminal wrongdoing or anything,
I'm not saying criminal wrongdoing. Yeah. Financial irregularities.
Right. I'm on Deputy Murphy now. You put the question. You got the question. And we'll have to specify ourselves what we mean precisely by financial irregularity, in case some people misinterpret that for misappropriation, or other people might have a different view. So we'll have to be...
I'll come back to that in the
We'll
afternoon.
come back to exactly what we mean by that phrase, because it could mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. No, Catherine Murphy is next. No, in fair.
Sorry, I'm not trying to take our time. I just want to know, is Mr. Dunn's going to be here in the afternoon?
What we would do, he hasn't had an opportunity to get his phone since he was here. So what I would suggest